100 years ago, this specific spot was a dirt crossroads crowded with horse carts. Today, it is a high-density, neon-lit intersection. If you took someone from the 1920s and dropped them onto this exact street corner today, the physical landmarks and economic patterns they knew would be unrecognizable. We have photographic records of what everyday commerce looked like in these hubs exactly 1 century ago. Here, merchants operate out of horse-drawn wagons on dirt floors in what was then a typical marketplace. These spaces managed to rewrite their physical identities over a century while retaining their status as national landmarks. These shifts in the landscape take different forms. They can involve massive logistical expansion, economic repurposing, or in some cases, being cut off from the path of progress entirely. Consider the south rim of the Grand Canyon in the 1920s. It was a tiny, isolated outpost where a few tourists in wool suits and dresses stood on the unprotected edge of the rock. Growth began when the Santa Fe Railway laid track directly to the canyon, building rustic log and stone lodges to serve travelers stepping off steam locomotives. While human activity began trickling in, the geological feature itself remained static. That layered wall of red rock is the same height and width it was in 1920. Starting with a single dot representing the 1920s rail depot, it fractures and multiplies into a network of visitor centers. This area shifted from an exclusive railroad experiment into a regulated ecosystem, using shuttle routes to process millions of visitors. The focal point never changed. The transformation happened by altering the volume and movement of the crowd standing around it. In 1920s Louisiana, the French Quarter was a neighborhood in decline. The wrought iron balconies were sagging, hanging over storefronts in need of repair. Because the buildings were failing, the rents were low. The neighborhood was primarily occupied by dock workers, new immigrants, and grocers who required low overhead to live near the river. That lack of economic investment provided a blind spot. During Prohibition, musicians used these affordable, hidden spaces to develop the early sounds of American jazz. This chart maps a dynamic where the architecture remains static, represented by a flat line indicating no structural changes. But a second line shows the economic and cultural value soaring as those same sagging balconies transitioned into restored, premium real estate. The music that once existed in the shadows now serves as an economic engine for the city. The neighborhood's identity shifted from a functional necessity for workers to a preserved destination for tourists. A neighborhood changes its identity when the architectural pieces society once discarded become its most protected assets. In 1926, the government designated a new highway stretching from Chicago to Los Angeles. Route 66 became a primary artery for cross-country travel and commerce. In the 1950s and 60s, the interstate highway system arrived, carving multi-lane concrete paths through the landscape to favor speed over local access. The economic effect was immediate. The new interstates bypassed the small towns that had built their local economies around catering to passing drivers. Businesses were left miles away from the new transit lanes, leading to commercial closures and abandonment across the plains. This abandonment resulted in a contradiction. Cut off from development, the architecture was frozen. The original chrome and neon were spared from replacement, as there was no economic incentive to build anything new in their place. Today, travelers seek out this weathered asphalt and these remote diners. They return because the lack of speed provides a direct connection to the past. The interstate system rendered Route 66 useless for getting somewhere fast, which is the exact reason it remains intact as a historical record. We have seen 3 ways a landscape changes: through logistical scaling, the shifting value of old architecture, and the preservation that comes from being left behind. These forces created environments that operate differently than they did in 1920. Yet the purpose of these places remains consistent. The reasons people visit them have not changed as much as the structures themselves. Whether they are standing at the canyon rim, a jazz club, or a roadside diner, travelers are seeking the same vistas, sounds, and experiences that drew people to these coordinates a century ago. The structures evolved to handle different economic and logistical realities, but the locations remain magnets for the same reasons they were in the 1920s. The American story is defined by the persistence of these destinations, even as the world around them is rebuilt.